Growing up in the 50s, it was such an innocent time, really. We used to go everywhere in the city by bus to the museums, to the lake.
And liked it. The neighborhoods were marvelous, because you had every ethnic group possible.
I could not say enough about the sisters that taught us. And Our Lady of the Window was such a big part of our education at Notre Dame High School. We not only got an excellent academic education, the spiritual education we got was phenomenal. And this is very personal to me, but when I was thinking of entering the convent in senior year, I was all alone for some reason after school. And I looked up at her and I just said, Mother Mary, please help me decide where God wants me to go. And I have never forgotten that moment. And now, thank God, Our Lady of the Window is with us here at Mount Notre Dame in our chapel.
My first day at Notre Dame High School, when the sister came down to get our homeroom to bring us up to the class, there was a grace that I had, and like it was the only time in my life where I felt a grace. And it was, you're going to be a sister of Notre Dame de Namur.
So I started and went to St. Peter Canisius School in first grade. And it was then that I had really profound experience. I loved my teacher. Sister Mary Irene was waiting for me to leave so she could lock the door and then go to lunch with the other sisters. As I walked by her, I saw her turn and look in the hallway, and the other sisters were coming out of their rooms. And when she saw them, she had a smile on her face from ear to ear. Now, I was only 7 years old, but I remember thinking, I don't know what she's got, but I want it. It wasn't until later when I realized what she had was community. So from that point on, I knew I wanted to be a sister. We went because we were needed there, and we have always gone where we were needed. This is why we came to Cincinnati from Europe in 1840.
Our mission, or our charism as we call it, is to spread the goodness of God.
What was great was Notre Dame let the sisters take their gifts and their talents in whatever profession it was, teaching, nursing, whatever, spiritual direction, counseling, and use it where the needs were. And the people grabbed on and learned from the sisters, but also taught us so many things too.
I was sent to various places in Ohio and Illinois when I first started. We lived at St. Robert Bellarmine Convent, but then we would go out to teach at the high school.
When I went back to Chicago in 1982, I had been teaching 17 years between Dayton and Cincinnati. I was at St. Robert's for the next 36 years with my good friend. And at that time, I didn't know her at all. But got to know her very well.
You never fought, but we had a lot of good times.
We had a lot of fun together. The sisters were so well treated, loved, and it was a mutual love. We loved the parishioners.
I loved parish work. Well, I worked in 3 parishes. I worked in River Forest and St. Luke's. I was a director of religious ed. And so I had wonderful men and women who taught in their homes. They started a place for women who were abused. And they not only paid for it, they volunteered to work in it. My second parish was in Rockford, and that was St. Rita's. There were a lot of young people who had children. And because I was director of religious ed, I visited all the parents in the public schools. So I knew everybody in the parish. It was a wonderful experience. My last one was 32 years. My father was dying and I needed a job in Chicago. And so I got a job at St. Gregory's, and my father died 2 years later. And you know what? I never left. And the thing I would think about St. Gregory's is all are welcome.
I started out teaching 5th grade at St. Victor's School in Calumet City. But while I was teaching, I got introduced to a place in East Chicago, Indiana. And it was a shelter for homeless people between the two big steel mills. And so one of the things I was asked to do by Father Leo was start a team to help drug addicts and alcoholics and their families. So we called it the St. Victor's Outreach Team. And somebody at Catholic Theological Union found out about this and thought it would be a great ministry site for those students. So they sent students to come to the outreach team to learn about addictions. One of the first official students was Pope Leo. Well, he was just Bob. He was Bob Prevost. And he and another Bob, also an Augustinian, came. Both of them were extremely open to learning and willing to get involved and take a risk and travel with me all over the city to treatment centers. It was after I left 5 years later, CTU, that I started the shelter for the people in Chicago on the South Side. By the time I left, after 17 years, I had 750 volunteers, from grade school kids to college kids to adults in parishes all over, and not just Catholic parishes. It was a wonderful, wonderful endeavor.
What stands out for me is Julie always said we educate for life. And then that might be not in the classroom, but it can be in different ways. And like for myself, being in healthcare, I saw my life as being an educator, as teaching people how to get through the healthcare system. And it really was teaching people about their rights. That was not an easy job, because the most vulnerable were not receiving services they should have been. So again, I think we educate that way, and I think we all keep looking at ways that we can meet the new needs of the time.
The highlight of my religious life, I believe, was when in 1972, I was missioned to the Belgian Congo, which was at that time named Zaire, and today it's known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. It was called Ngidinga, and there I was a nurse. I ministered in our dispensary until it became a hospital, and then I became administrator of the hospital and delivered babies, did things that we never do here or never allowed to do here.
I was asked to go to Catholic Theological Union in Chicago to study for a certificate in pastoral ministry. That's how I got to Chicago the first time. After 5 years in campus ministry, we were eligible for a 2-month sabbatical. So my proposal was to go to Zaire at that time, later Congo, where we had sisters and they spoke French. So I went, and it was the first Sunday at Mass in the parish, and it was filled with song and dance and movement. But I felt at the end of Mass, I said, this is where I feel at home. So I had offer of a job, and the third job was in a parish, South Side, about as far as you can go before you reach the city limits. And it was a very poor area. As luck or whatever had it, Barack Obama came about 3 months before I did, so he was already in place. He would go into those homes, sit down with the grandmas, and patiently listen to their accounts of what they felt they needed, what their problems were, what their issues were. And then he prepared them to go down to City Hall. and they were going to speak for themselves. And I was so impressed because that was my motto of ministry was you don't do for the people what they can do for themselves. You empower them. And that stood with me all the rest of my life. When I went back to Africa for 28 more years, that was my dream was to empower the sisters. That you have the potential, you can do it.
The spirit of St. Julie was imbibed in the people in Chicago, and it's being carried on. So for 100 years, I think we can be grateful to those pioneer sisters who went there and gave their lives to education.
It's not just our celebration, but it is everybody's celebration of how the good news of the gospel and the goodness of God has been spread up there over 100 years through a whole diversity of Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur.
We keep those connections of the relationships that will keep that history alive for us.
Thank you so much for your love and your support over all these years where the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur have been present in the Chicago area.
I just thank you for all the wonderful memories that I have of you, of visiting your homes, of going out with you, worshiping with you.
Our hearts are filled with gratitude and love because we were shown so much love in Chicago.
And so 100 years in Chicago, it's not an ending, it's the beginning of where's the next 100 going to take us.
Yay, Chicago.
Hi, Chicago. We're still here. Lots of stories to enjoy.
Windy city, and some of us blew in and some of us blew out.
I love Chicago and Lake Michigan, and thank you for everything.